morning for all of us. We are on that part of Europe with the morning on our side. My name is Oana Năsui. I'm from Formare Culturala Platform. Actually, is a program of Postmodernism Museum Association in Romania. I'm very glad that we put together this project, and we are very happy we have attracted so many interesting colleagues.
Thank you very much, Oana, and bună dimineața to all of you. Good morning. So lovely to see you. So lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Oana and Stan. And I'm going to be the facilitator for this morning, and I am super pleased to be in the company of all of you, but not least to be in the company of Hannah and Shethar. I'm very, very curious about what they're going to tell us. But first, I will just give you a very short introduction to what are we talking about when we talk about cancel culture in the Nordics. And when I talk about the Nordics, it's Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, it's Finland, and it's Iceland, and it's the three autonomous countries, Greenland, Faroe Islands, and the Åland Islands. And what we can see here when we talk about cancel culture in public spaces, like many other places, it still predominantly refers to challenging or removing or recontextualizing public symbols, art, expression, monuments in public spaces, statues, street names, murals, artworks. And it's very often when these are seen to in somehow conflict with the values, the histories, or the figures within a contextual and contemporary framework. So it changes over time, and things that have once been celebrated becomes controversial. And these controversial monuments in public spaces, often financed by public money or financed by donators who have donated within a specific understanding of the meaning of that public space, create controversies on quite many levels. It's both about how it's being perceived and received by specific groups in society that might be provoked or feel it as a symbol of something that we have passed in terms of our societal development. But it's also about, you can call it social design, social interaction. It's about the values that we have also put into our public spaces that are becoming more and more inclusive, more and more interactive, more and more open. So we have gone from a kind of monumental thinking about public spaces to something that is much more on the level with the people who's actually inhabiting them. I won't dive into Sweden because I know that Hannah will give us a very good overview, so I will not really touch so much on Sweden, but I'll just say that all 5 countries have, within the last 1, 2, and 3 years, have quite a number of controversies that either reoccur or have occurred because we have somehow become even more aware and more deliberately thinking about the design of our public spaces. In Denmark, we can start with my own country. I'm from Copenhagen. In Denmark, we can see, for instance, that around our post-colonial history and the debate about the Danish colonial history and colonial responsibility, not least now, when Donald Trump has said that he wants to take over Greenland, the Inuks in Copenhagen, the Inuit society is obviously becoming quite visible, and it's also quite on the front page at the moment. How do we actually address 1/10 of all Inuits live in Copenhagen, which gives it quite a large community, so they're very present in our everyday life. At the same time, they're completely demarginalized, and Inuit presence in a historical term is a very colonial presence. It's a very colonial way of addressing the Danish-Greenlandic connection in a Danish context. It's different in Nuuk, of course, but it's still from a very often from a colonial perspective. But what we have recently seen most is the Danish colonial history in the West Indies. US Virgin Islands, as you might know, were Danish before we sold them to the US. So Trump has one point. We have done it before. We have sold land and people to another country more than 100 years ago. And that colonial history was basically based on an alliance between the emerging West Indies companies and the noblemen in Denmark, and it's represented everywhere. There are so many palaces, statues in public spaces, statues of kings, not least. King Frederick V was the main king in our colonial history. And a few years ago, there was a throw of one of the statues was thrown in the canals of Copenhagen as a symbol of overthrowing the colonial mainstream history and recreate a new narrative. In Norway, the famous Vigeland Sculpture Park has been, in many, many ways, a celebrated park of sculptures and contemporary sculpture. But it's also a park where there has been quite a controversy about a very large, you could say, a very large monolith, and the large monolith has been seen as a nationalist symbol in a way that simply no longer correlates with how we want to perceive ourselves in the Nordic countries and what is actually mainstream. There are strong nationalist movements, but there are also very strong non-nationalist movements, and therefore the monolith in the Vigeland Park has been one of these centers of controversy that comes back. And in Norway, it has readdressed the whole idea of democracy and how democracy is being reflected. And coming back to Copenhagen, because it's also the same in Oslo, there's a huge debate about representation of women, that there are so many celebrated men in public spaces, but where are all the women? Where are all the famous female writers, the female artists, the female politicians, the female thinkers, the female scientists? So there is right now in both Norway and Denmark an ongoing process about addressing and finding out, trying to readdress how can we balance that out, or what does that mean in public spaces? And in Copenhagen, for instance, there is a very, very visible initiative which is about defining the 100 most significant females and give them space in public space, for instance. So it happens all around. One of the most celebrated individuals in Finland is Marshal Mannerheim, the man who stood up for Finland in the Winter War, but he also represents a very specific ideology, and he represents a very specific idea of Finnishness and nationalism that is also now being subject for controversies and reflection. So there is this transition of history, this transition of things that happens over time, where values are being re-evaluated, readdressed, and rethought, and basically also reframed, which forces public bodies, municipalities, regional bodies, institutions to rethink what are we actually presenting, why are we presenting it, how do we frame it, how do we even talk about it, how do we celebrate, what kind of worthing do we have? So for me, I would say this is an ongoing and it's a never-ending process, but it's a process that we need to have a language for. It's a process we need to be able to do some significant research on. It's a process where we need to include not only the artists and the politicians and the donors, but also obviously the people who are going to live with them, be there. Because in a classical kind of interpretorial way, the interpretation, the participation, the perception of them are in the mind of the viewers, the people living with them. So on that note, just to set a kind of tone, what I will do is I will allow every one of you to get to the table, raise your questions. Please do it in the chat, and then I will try to my best to give you an opportunity to raise your questions to our two speakers. But first out will be my colleague, Hanna Granlund from Intercult in Sweden. Intercult is an institution that comes very dear to me. It's one of our oldest collaborating institutions from the center in which I work. And we have had many, many, many discussions over the years about interculturality, cultural values, cultural democracy. What are we talking about when we talk about the role of culture in society? Culture is a change maker, culture is a transition factor, etc. So Hanna is one of the researchers in Intercult and one of the project managers and a dear colleague. So please, Hanna, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Niels. I'm so happy to be here and to be able to talk about this subject, which is very near and dear to me. So, as Niels said, my name is Hanna Granlund. I work today as a project manager at Intercult. But my academic background is in art history and in heritage studies. And I would like, first of all, to share my screen with you, to share this presentation I made to give you a visual overview of specifically the Swedish context for public monuments, controversies, both old and new, as well as my general case studies, which will hopefully be enlightening. So first of all, I hope you all can see the screen. Yeah, okay, I see a thumbs up. Awesome. And now I would like to move to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so I would like to start with a bit of historic context, because this can be a good explanation both for the origin of public art management in Sweden, as well as in many ways the origin of controversies and contested views on how to use public art and monuments. So for Sweden specifically, the creation and preservation of public art and monuments have been shaped by a very long, continuous nationalization process. Sweden got its first proper expanded state with like public management and similar in the 1600s. And that included the first legislation about the preservation of important, or what was considered important, historical monuments and artifacts. At this point in time, we can see a contest between, on one hand, the desire of the early Swedish state to establish itself. It is important to strengthen your claim to age and establishment as a new state by pointing at your history, your artifacts, your monuments. They are quite important for that when competing against other regional powers in Europe. At the same time, a lot of public monuments and historical artifacts at this time were not used in that way at all. One example is that common people were often using, for example, grave mounds, like prehistoric grave sites, to create brick ovens for making bread and similar. So you can see sort of the start of the conflict in a way. Throughout the centuries, the state has tended to use public art and monument to strengthen its presence and influence, both in the mainland, so to speak, but also in the regions that have either historically been part of the Swedish Empire period or areas that are still part of Sweden but may not always have been. When it comes to the last 100 years, there is a marked difference between the development in Sweden and in the other Nordics, and it primarily centers on our experiences during World War II. As Niels said, there are both nationalist and anti-nationalist movements in Norway and Denmark, as well as Iceland and Finland, but they have all very much been shaped by the experiences during the war. Sweden was not as involved, and it means that the development of public art and monuments have instead been shaped by state legislation centering on the development of the welfare state from the 1930s onward. One such legislation is not quite a legislation, it's called the 1% rule. It's a financial principle when erecting public buildings or infrastructure to spend 1% of the funding on site-bound public art. The original purpose of this principle was to create more working opportunities for artists, but also to foster the cultural and social values in public spaces that Sweden were trying to develop at this point in time. And This legislation was also instituted by a guy named Arthur Engelberg, who was the Minister of both Education but also Ecclesiastical Affairs. So the intertwining of art, education, moral and spiritual matters have always been quite present in public art. Today, again, as Niels said, controversies about public art in Sweden and Denmark often center on post-colonial heritage. Minority perspectives have become more important, as well as trying to shift established narratives, and new suggestions for monuments and revisions of existing monuments usually center on trying to expose or bring to life underlying social tensions or dissonance in public spaces. Now I would like to present a couple of case studies to showcase this. The first one is called The Well of the Iron Square. It's situated in Göteborg, which is the major port city in Sweden on the west coast. It has been historically a center for exporting iron from Sweden to the rest of the world. And this well is in many regards a monument to the Swedish iron industry. You can see this general development in monuments during the 1900s as well as the late 1800s, focusing on uplifting industrial history as a sort of shift from previous monuments, often celebrating kings, military leaders, and more national romantic sort of images. This well is crowned with 5 sculptures representing the 5 continents. And the recent controversies have focused on the very stereotypical depictions of the 5 continents that these allegorical figures symbolize. You can see, for example, the figure symbolizing Asia is situated in a very like lotus pose with the crown. You got Africa with the sort of water well flowing out, and people have been linking this to the role that the Swedish iron industry and export played in the slave trade. So controversies around this have centered on how who is in power sort of determines the history that we choose to remember in public places. This sculpture, this fountain, was meant as a monument to the iron industry. Today, it has become a monument to the slave trade and Sweden's role in the colonial process. What this controversy has resulted in so far is basically, if you go to the website of the city and you look at their explanations of important public monuments, there will be an expanded text for this well in particular, explaining the colonial context and the ways that the sculptures are misleading or stereotype, the way they reflect racial prejudice, both present and past. My next example is a statue of a man called Louis de Geer, which is standing in the city of Norrköping. It's quite similar to the well in that it is a monument dedicated to Swedish industrial history and war industry, and again, similar to the well, the recent controversy has again centered on the way that the development of Swedish industry is linked to the Swedish involvement in the slave trade. Louis de Geer was a nobleman in the 1600s, again around the same time as the first public legislation of monuments came into being. And he is regarded in many ways as the founder of the Swedish industry, and in particular the war industry, as this coincided with the peak of the Swedish Empire period. Now I want to move forward in time a bit to a much more contemporary event in Sweden. In the city of Malmö in the south, just on the edge of the sea separating Sweden and Denmark. There was a series of murders in the early 2000s being committed over the course of more than a decade. As the perpetrator eventually was caught, there was, in retrospect, a clear racial dynamic to the murders. They were motivated by racist hatred and violence, and the response of the city was quite unwilling to acknowledge this. So this monument, or this project, came into being over a decade later, created by a very strong grassroots movement in Malmö. And some of the people involved you can see here, and Robert Nilsson Mohammadi in particular has written academic publications on this event and how this monument project seeks to address the sort of trauma that this series of murders provoked in Malmö. The theory is that collective trauma is something that arises when the reality of a situation is denied or suppressed in some way. The denial of the city to recognize the racist motivations behind these murders created a dissonance between the public and the city, and perhaps even more importantly, a dissonance between different parts of the public. For the white majority who were not personally targeted, they could be afforded to forget in a different way compared to the racialized minority who were the direct targets of this violence. This shows that some people can be afforded to forget trauma in a way that other groups may not. And the way the monument seeks to readdress this is partly by acknowledging this through social processes, through interviews, through testimonials, through talks, and through public activities, but also physically imposing something in the city space as a reminder. So here I would like to include two examples because, again, they show quite an interesting difference in perspective on how to handle this sort of collective trauma and processing. One is a concept for the sculpture that will be hopefully finished by the fall this year. It is what the city has approved. At the same time, as this project developed, there was a suggestion to put a very different type of sculpture in place in the city. And you can see a small version of it down in the right corner. It is called Your Mother, or Din Mamma in Swedish, and it's basically a recreation of the Pieta by Michelangelo with the Virgin Mary holding Jesus, but instead it is a mother holding her son who is a victim of gang violence. This sculpture is currently standing in a church in Kalmar, which is another city quite close to Malmö. And the discussion on which type of statue or monument to create sort of reflects different attitudes towards public art and the debate between a sort of more abstract, highbrow public art approach, which critics think is not approachable. It's not really understandable unless you have an art degree yourself. And on the other hand, a much more religiously inspired sculpture that may feel crude or crass to some people. Again, I like this example because it is an interesting example of the way public art can be used to highlight failures of the state or the local government or another institution in power, while at the same time demanding the involvement and approval of the institution itself. It's a sort of dynamic tension between, on one hand, a grassroots movement which is quite fluid and doesn't have a lot of resources, but does have a strong local grounding. And on the other hand, the government, the institution, the people in power who have the resources, sometimes the same people are involved in both. It's also an interesting example of something that Niels and Mohammadi call creating screen memories. Screen memories are sort of comfortable ways of remembering important historical events. And monuments and public art allow you to sort of focus those memories and paint them over the monuments in a way that's perhaps more comfortable or easy to remember or less taxing to remember by placing the event in a firm past, contrasting it with a more enlightened present. As a sort of far juxtaposition to this, I would like to briefly mention that a couple of municipalities in Sweden have decided to stop commissioning controversial or provocative public art, instead focusing on what they call classic and timeless public art, and what this may imply about what we consider to be timeless or neutral or timeless in any way. Last but not least, I'm going to move back to the way we use public art to process traumatic events and mourning. This spring, Sweden had its worst mass shooting in recent history at a school in the city of Örebro. And the regional museum, after this event, decided on a project of collecting memories of the event, of collecting the spontaneous public art and memorabilia that showed up all over the city after this very horrific event. So it was it's an ongoing work. It collects objects, stories, photographs, newspapers, and simply serves to, again, it's an institutional approach of archiving and creating collective memories of what happened, something that we can look back on in 50 years or 100 years. I do enjoy this photo in particular because it shows a large crowd gathering around a monument from the 1800s, featuring a man called Engelbrekt, who led a rebellion in Sweden in the 1400s. I'm also interested in these photographs as they show, in a way, what we wish to remember of this event. We wish to remember the solidarity, the community support, the institutional response to the event. And again, it's about what we choose to collectively preserve and remember in public spaces. And those were the last of my examples. So I really looking forward to Cesar's presentation. And I would like to thank you all so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to your questions later. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Hannah. And lots of questions came up as you spoke to me, and I will be more than happy to raise them to you after the break and after Cesar's presentation. I really think it's super, super good that you kind of outline the history, because nothing happens out of nothing. It's all connected to history, to power structures, to self-identification processes that also change on an individual basis from citizen to citizen throughout time. So thank you very much for highlighting that and for some very great examples. Now we're going to the Romanian example, to the other end of Europe, reflecting a different history, but at the same time also a very European history, a history that quite many Europeans share, a history of, you can say, different perspectives to some of the same topics, but at the very same time, also a lot of things that align and a lot of things that are equivalent, you could say, to the movement that we see up here in the north. That is not that strange, but still quite different from what you have in the Balkans and in Romania. So I'm looking so much forward to an esteemed researcher and teacher and professor. And Cesar, I think I would just hand it over to you. And maybe if you will, if people don't already know you, just give you 2 minutes about who you are.
Thank you very much, Niels. I'm a historian and museographer at the City Museum of Bucharest, and I'm very interested in what happened in the public space and what happened with what we called recently free art, because it's free for everyone, but because it is in a public space, it creates some problems because the public space is for everyone, and everyone need to have a point of view. Thank you very much, Hannah, for your presentation. Thank you very much, Juana Nasui, for inviting me, and you, Niels, for facilitate this event today. I will try to share the presentation. I hope you can see it. So now from the other part of Europe, in Romania, where we have several situations resulting from different political regime, ranking from foreign occupation to communist, and from to communist to post-communist. So I will invite you to join me in a trip over the history of the public monuments. The first monuments we had in Bucharest and in Romania, also in the southern part of Romania, are the stone crosses. They are the early public monuments from the 16th to 19th century, because at the beginning of the 9th century, it's ending the medieval in Romania. So we have this kind of monuments. These commemorate historical, social, or religious event, from the battles to epidemics, and have strong identity significance. So we have it today because of what they mean to the Romanian culture. So it's the cross. And even if they got broke, as we can see in the bottom of this cross, they were, the people try to put it back and to have it for a long time. And many of these monuments are moved just to be preserved. So in the beginning of the 19th century, we have an occupation by Russian troops, and the first monuments we have in Bucharest that are not stone crosses are made by the Pavel Kiselev, the governor of the Romanian Principate. So he made two monuments in the metropolitan hills. One, the monument to the Russian soldiers who lost their lives in the Wallachian lands, and the sundial, who announced the citizen about the middle of the day. We don't have images, and we don't know how this looks in Bucharest, because both was destroyed during the revolution in 1848, but we have some descriptions. Also, we have the obelisk in Iași, made in the same period under the same ruler. And also we have the image of the monuments in Brăila, located where a bomb fell near the Tsar Nicholas I, and it was raised here by the command of Pavel Kiselev. This one also, we don't have it because during the occupation in the First World War, the Turks destroyed. And in Bucharest, we have the remains of the obelisk. Is this on the hills near the Metropolitan Church? Nobody knows about this, and I found it, and I will make some diligence to recover and to put them in the view of the public. The other monument was raised during the Revolution of 1848. It was the Statue of Liberty. Lives only a few days because it was destroyed by the rulers of the Ottomans. And we have two monuments in Bucharest. The first monument that is no longer exist. It was a short life. And because we are under the speaking of the occupation, this is the poet Ovidiu statue that was took down by the Bulgarian occupation to be a war trophy to be moved in Bulgaria. But this was not happened. Why I talk at first about the crosses is because of the significance of the crosses. This is the cross raised by the previous governor, Russian governor, Mikhail Miloradovich, on the same place, on the Metropolitan Hills, who was not destroyed by the revolutionary during the 1848 because of the significance in the Romanian culture. It's a cross. We are not destroying the cross. So the cross was here for many, many times. These are interwar pictures. And after that, this was moved in several places and now is in the garden of a church. So we can see it. And the point is the significance of the monument, what it represents, even if represent the Russian occupation because of the special significance of the cross, it's not destroyed. We have another kind of monument that is not longer in the field of Bucharest because of the ignorance. We have two monuments, the monuments of the fallen heroes of the teaching corps and the monument of the military, the infantry monument, who was moved and put it in the warehouse to be remade in a different place when the monument of King Ferdinand I was erected in Bucharest. So the two monuments that I spoke, they are lost. This one is one of the first monuments that was destroyed when the communists take the power in Romania. Also, the monument of King Carol I was destroyed because all of these monuments was represent the monarchy, and the communists are trying to rewrite the history. Also, the head of the political parties in the interwar periods and before the Great War, the statue was destroyed, and only some of them was remade after the communist fall. This is the statue of Lasker Catargiu, the mayor statue, the statue of Mayor Pache Protopopescu, Tache Ionescu, Eugeniu Carada, St. George statue, Octavian Goga bust, statue of King Alexander I of Yugoslavia, the Arc of Triumph was modified, not destroyed, but modified. The banners from the left and right was the had the face of the kings Ferdinand and Queen Mary, and after the communists came, they took it off and make this decoration part. And after the communists take the power, we have the statue of the new leaders. This is the statue of Joseph Stalin. But during the process of de-Stalinization after 1956, it was removed from the field. But until the 1990, we have the statue of Vladimir Lenin and Petru Groza monument, who was first prime minister under the communist rule, and also some political activists. Then it's not longer exist in the field. We here in the green part was a bust of Dumitru Petrescu, one of the communist leaders, and Vasile Raita in the garden of a factory. Ilie Pintilie, also communist leader. And we have some monuments that reminding of the sacrifice of some of the people who died, workers who died in the strike in 1933, who was covered, and a few years ago was discovered, and it was a place with real ideological fight, because some of them were happy, some of the people from the area were happy to reveal the monument. Others was against the communist rule, and it was like a battlefield on the street. And we have flowers for commemorate the victims, and the paint to erase their sacrifice. Also, some communist monument that was moved after the revolution in December 1989. Here also the two monuments of Marx and Engels, and a copy of Vera Muhina statue placed in the Cotroceni garden. And we have the situation after the post, in the time that after the communism failed. We have one of the most contested monument in Romania, in post-communist Romania, is the memorial of the victim of the communists, the heroes who died during the revolution in December 1999. But because it was raised during the Ion Iliescu president, it was rejected. It was rejected because of his shape, and rejected because it was considered to be the monument of Ion Iliescu. Also, the situation of the monument made it to be rejected, and also became a commercial issue for some who wanted to be very funny. So it is the first monument that was under public debate to be moved. So it was a press campaign, and in the social media was a real debate to be moved. After the City Hall take it in administration, because it was under the Ministry of Culture, it was renovated, and now it's look better, and it's not have to be moved. But and have another significance for other people. Here it's a place for commemorate the victim from Palestine. It's the place to honor the memory of the deceased. The other most contested monument in Bucharest was this monument named Daco-Roman Symbiosis, with the Emperor Trajan with the Capitolin Wolf and the Dacian Stendars. Those are the two elements, the founder of Rome and the flag of the Dacian. It's also from the beginning, because of the shape, of the artistic shape, form, was contested, because as Hannah said, it's not good in public to have the emperor nude. So it was rejecting from the day was the first day that it was relieved. But in time became the most famous monument in Bucharest, like Mackensen Peace. You know, every tourist try to find this monument and take a picture with him when he came back from the trip. But the tail of the she-wolf was taken off to be sold, and when they tried to put it back, it was not fixed because of the highlight of the metal. They don't know what chemically formula was, and it started a scandal. The sculptor was accused that he was made it a fake monument, that it was take it from there. It stays until now in the warehouse, even if it was discussion to be replaced in another in another place. So the next monument, it's the monument to the Prince Rainier III of Monaco. When the people find out that in the Circus Park, it supposed to place a monument, some activist was against that with ecologist reason. They said, we don't want any statue in our park, and they make a meeting with message from the mayor and to the city halls, and the press did a very good communicate in favor of the Protestants, and the monument was placed in another place near the park, in a parking spot. And after the monument was relieved, the Protestants, the people who protest against the monument, show their sorry. They like the monument. It was meant to be in the park. The children love it. They are always in this place. It's full of child. In the back, we can see they also did a special place for the kids, and also people lose some parking spots. So it was like this, but this is what happened when people contest a monument and they don't know about it. Another monument that I want to show you is the monument of Samuel von Bruckenthal, who was a subject of nationalist protest after the reveal. Samuel von Bruckenthal was a ruler of Transylvania, who was accused by killing the heads of the popularized in the late of 18th century, and it is the movement against it. It's a symbol of how people rise against a person, but in political in a political message. It's like a radicalization on the extreme of the right in Romania. I put it on this part. Is not the single one. A few Hungarian leaders and representative monuments are contested because of the past relationship. So it was vandalized with the paint with the color of the Romanian flag, and also because he's German ethnic, a bag of Lidl supermarket, it's put it on there to make it this very clear. So it was quickly cleared, and it remains on the place. The other monument that I wanted you to see it's the monument Hydra. It's a symbolic of here we see it on the place where the Lenin statue were, and it's a mythological symbol of what happened after the revolution, what grows from the head of Lenin, and during the outside exhibition, the month of the sculptures in Iași last year, it was vandalized because of the artistic expression. It was not agreed by the public. It was a press and social media campaign against the monument to be removed from there, and it in the end the monument was vandalized, and the press make another campaign because it was a very interesting moment, and in the end the statue was sold on a good price on the auction. We have also a monument that was contested by the people because of the artistic shape. It's a couple of radio voices who was spoken on Free Europe, Lovinescu and Ierunca, and it was placed in Cotroceni neighborhood, and it is a private initiative, but the people protested and have a social media campaign against the shape, the artistic shape of this monument. And I counted on my social media more than 60 screenshots of the discussion against the monument. It was a real debate of the some leaders, from cultural leaders, who was against this monument. I'm at the end of the presentation, but also I want to show you that this is not an Romanian problem. It's all over the world what happened against the monuments, or are contested because of their political views, more or less the artistical view, but we can see in the social movement what happened against monument. Here it's also a monument of a Soviet army that was painted in Sofia. Thank you for your attention here. It's what I would like to see in a Bansky view about monument. And one thing is about the radicalization of the population on social media. Yesterday or on Monday, I saw fake news about monument near Arad that it's in the process to be cleaned. It's in the field, and it's commemorate the heroism of the Romanian army in the Second World War. And the fake news was like they wanted to remove it. They wanted to erase it for us to don't know our history. So this is one of the discourse that we found it in the radicalization of the nationalism in the monument area. So I didn't put it on the presentation, but I wanted to mention it at the end of my speech. So I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Cesar. I think it's an amazing kind of tour through the history of public monuments in Romania, and specifically your last point. It's not just a Romanian exercise. This happens everywhere, from the beheading of kings on old statues in Copenhagen that are thrown in the canals, or the paint over of German governors or ethnic German governors in the Habsburg time that are being placed in the streets in Sibiu. I've seen that statue, actually. I think it's just an order. I will just ask Juana, should we skip the break and then go directly to the questions? Would that be okay?
For me, fine, but hopefully, if the colleagues can still stay.
So, yes, would you just allow us to jump over the break and then go directly to the questions? Would that be okay with all of you?
Question observations.
Yeah.
Or if you need to just go and come, so no problem.
Exactly. No problem. Just to keep the ease of it, because we are running out of time, in the sense we only have 20 minutes left, according to the program at least. It raises a lot of interesting perspectives, I think, from both of you, and I think it's super interesting to also hear that you both, in a way, address the simple fact that it's being art, monuments, symbols in public spaces are subjects to interpretation. They're subjects to how people perceive them in a specific time. What do you think is, I'm coming back to you, Hannah, because in one of your last slides, you said, well, now you see municipalities or public bodies basically wanting non-provocative art, fostering the idea that whatever we do to design a public space, it should not provoke anybody. But isn't that exactly what art is all about? Art is all about having opinions and celebrating ideas and values. So how do they plan to get about it in Sölvesborg? Can you just elaborate a bit on that?
What I can tell is that they made this decision in 2019, and there has been a re-election ever since then. So basically, I'm not sure how they plan to go about it. My guess is that they use their own preferences in their art commission boards, and that's pretty much it.
So there still is this power structure. Somebody designs, somebody has the power to design, because I think one of the things that I came to think about listening to both of you is this: who gets to decide what's actually put on? And what are the values in that debate? And is there even a debate, or is it just responses? Is there a conversation? Do we even have a platform for having a conversation about the value of public art, or art that provokes us or stimulates us, or make us rethink positions? Should there be a kind of consultation process? How can we approach this in Romania and in Sweden? Cesar, how can we create frameworks for public conversations about what is actually being put on display?
We need to do propaganda for the monument. So I take the example from the past, when the community decided that a person or an event worthy to be commemorated with a monument, an initiative committee was formed. And the committee was responsible for preparing and submitting the necessary documents, fundraising, organizing a design competition, and also promoting the monument for the public. So they would organize conferences, concert, book launches, distribute illustrated podcast with the monument. And people paid for the monument will rise. They knew what will be in the public space. And once the monument was inaugurated, everybody wanted to participate. It was like the monument was for everybody. So it was a big ceremony, and the people considered it their own. So it's important for the people to know what is happened with their common space. So, of course, it's a power element to do the monument in the public space. Art is more politic than artistic in a way, but people should know. So another method was to build a full-scale model, one by one, to show how the statue would feel in the surrounding space. So people knew.
Yeah.
It's not only a geographical point. We met at the statue and you do the left on the statue. It's a symbol. And it should be a good symbol for everyone. In the a few years after the King Carol I came on the Romanian throne, he raised equestrian statue of Michael the Brave. Michael the Brave was the first Romanian prince who unite all the Romanian province in one country. It was a political view. And the declaration of King Carol I was, "I will be your next Michael the Brave," by erasing his equestrian statue. So they are a declaration. Every monument are a declaration of a thing, or what is the point to be achieved. So it should be explained. It should be shown to the people how it looks, and this it is also feedback for the authorities, for the sculptures, how people show the political argue and the artistical view.
I think that's a fantastic, this idea of feedback, of conversation. Felicia, thank you very much for your question, Felicia. You're touching on this as well. You're talking about this, what could be the role, what could be the role of public consultation, and what role could they play in the decision-making process. If we go to Sweden, Hannah, what could that look like in a Swedish context?
Is it possible to say something, please?
Yes. Afterwards, I will give you the word. Absolutely, Costin.
Okay, I'll wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Malmö and the anti-racist monument is an interesting example because it does have its origins in a grassroots organization, and their initial project called actually The Entire City is a Monument. They worked originally very informal. They took pictures, they had interviews, they painted benches, they did a bit of everything. But I think there is this sort of tendency or process where you sort of become institutionalized gradually as a grassroots movement. Eventually, a lot of the members, they formed an official committee or association called Anti-Racist Movement, and they started working again more closely with the city in order to get the like the resources, the permissions, the reach to work like on a more administrative higher level. So I think it is like a long process, and it's about like maintaining that balance between being very on the ground, in contact with with local communities, being part of the local community, and also receiving this support that you need to do something like bigger. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. In a way, it raises another one before giving the word to Costin. I think there is something about how you facilitate it, but also how you maintain the maintenance of public spaces, the redesigning, the contact between what is once decided and then what is supposed to be framing our interactivity as human beings. Who decides that in a Swedish context? Where is the power structure lying, and how is that being addressed in terms of the values that any public sculpture or monument might actually inflict on the people living there? Or
Yeah, on one hand, you have the like government apparatus commissioning public artists, having their like
the Arts Council.
reference, their standard. There's also this non-verbal part of the conversation, which is when a sculpture gets vandalized or graffitied or other forms of like direct interventions in the public landscape. And those are also a way of asserting control over the public space. I think the most famous example in Sweden is when a statue of the football player Zlatan Ibrahimovic got his nose knocked off. I think the entire statue was toppled over. And reasons unclear, might have been an angry football fan. Hard to tell, but it's also a way of intervening in the landscape and taking back power. Same with many graffiti artists, because they work everywhere and anywhere, both on public monuments and on areas that are neglected. Many of them actually work as like cleaners in their day jobs. So you graffiti nighttime, and then you go out and work for the city in the daytime to like remove everything again. So it's very sustainable in that regard.
That opens for a completely new design of how we actually even recruit into the public space in terms of expertise, of understanding what you're working with. Yeah. Costin, please, you had a question. You should unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Okay, now it's okay.
Now it's okay, yes.
Thank you very much. I'm studying public art since 2010, let's say, about 15 years till now. I'm working in architecture research. So I do have a little image about Romanian public art. But till then, I'd like to ask you to point some notes and maybe asking some questions. You said you consider the percent of a representation in public arts as a value. It really is. I mean, you must have the equal quantity of the leaders and females, because in order to have a representative place. Is this a question? I mean, of course, I want much more ladies in the public space in Romania, because we don't have them. And we do have some ladies to be appreciated and honored like this, but I really don't consider the quantity a parameter. I don't know, assign a number. I refuse to say that, because I refuse to put the queen on the same step with the, I don't know, what matter lady and so on. Excuse me, this is my opinion. The second one, for Anna, you are talking about the site art. You are referring to site-specific art or just site art? Because there is a difference, a big difference. The analysis of the site is much more bigger. So when you say something about, let's consider this art a site art, it's a very much approximation there, and I like to know what's about. Okay, and the last observation, you mentioned some quantity of objects put on the place and representing, figurating something. I don't agree. The subject, if they are work of art, they are much more than the simple representation or gathering some objects. I think, do you have to specify this is art, this is monument, this is object of art, and this is, I don't know, what do you propose? So I think for some kind of work of arts, the representation could be much more specific. I mean, in art, there is a part when the myth is coming into and it molded the reception of this monument. I don't agree with this representation of Pietà. Someone with much more religious temperament than me, it could be radical. I mean, I saw this type of representation even in Venice and Art Biennale. So we have to make, I think, a sort of line of differentiation between what is art, what is not art, because there are two different parts and two different specific parts of our past. So I have to know, how do I refer to a monument, work of art, and what is a simple representation and my will? Because there is another thing important in postmodern art. You are representing by your art yourself, not a group, not a society, not a part of society, and you have to establish much more clear. In my work, it is the work about Mr. Buyumar said about Gorduz on the steps of the National Museum. There is a work of Gorduz, a lot, very important sculpture. But the revolt actually was against the signification of, I don't know, a much more larger population, let's say. They didn't appreciate the quality and they didn't criticize the quality of art as the quality of representation, of public representation.
Thank you very much. I think being a museum director with a fine art museum background myself, I think the discussion of what is actually art is constantly changing.
Yes.
And what has really come up over the last 5-6 decades is the importance of basically of perception. And there's this old perceptive theory that no artist, no museum director, no public body can ever disregard, and that is that the perception, the logic, the causality is always in the mind of the viewer. So however much we might intend from the design that we create, there is the dimension of the viewer. And I completely agree. In a way, we have to be much more cautious about what we do and when we do it in public spaces. But I think you highlight a number of interesting questions, and I will just give both Cesar and Hannah an opportunity to reflect on what you just said, because I think, Karsten, you highlight some of the dilemmas. This is a world of dilemmas. So how do you, Cesar and Hannah, reflect? Let's take 2 minutes each, because we are getting close, and there is also 2 comments from Corina and Andrea that I would like to read aloud. So please.
Please, Hannah.
Okay,
Hannah first. Okay.
Of course. Public television is not meant to only serve the majority or like the mainstream of the population. Public service is about representing everyone. It's about showing the concerns and helping all parts of society. In Sweden, we have news in Finnish and in Sami to target like people who are not a large percentage of the population, but they are still important, they still matter. It's the same with public art, representing women, representing various minority groups, representing different social classes. It can either be like a band-aid, something that's supposed to smooth over social tensions, or it can be like the tip of the iceberg, like the culm of a longer social change and shift in attitudes. And sometimes it's kind of hard to tell which one it is, which is another issue. And when it comes to like the pieta, the religious art, I agree that it's hard to tell where art stops and the religious objects begin, because, well, a community might get more out of a religious artwork commemorating an important historical event or a tragic event. At the same time, not everyone will find that helpful or cathartic. So again, I think a variety of approaches would be the most useful when it comes to public art management.
Thank you very much. César?
Yes, thank you, Christine, for your question. And the first time, the first question was about the representation of women. I also wanted at least 100 sculpture of women, but you know what happened with the Aretia Tătărescu buste from Târgu Jiu? It was moved because of the dimension of the chest. So it was not who was represented, it was how was represented. And I am, in my opinion, there are two things: the representation of the idea, the message of the monument, and also the artistic value. And about the Gorduz, what I saw, I was looking with much attention the evolution of the Emperor Trajan monument. It was because of how it was made, not the message of Daco-Romance symbiosis. It is how it was made. It was have many nicknames, and it was a humoristic campaign with people with dogs in the hands. They are posing near the monument. So it was like we are seeing ironically, but we are taking over. We are talking about the shape, how the monument was made, the artistic value, not the message of the symbiosis. So this is my answer for Mr. Costin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And already at this stage, I can just conclude that we could have used a lot of time together, opening up several of these dilemma discussions that we have already touched upon. Unfortunately, we have not been programmed to do so today, but we will be back with another 2 of these sessions later on. But before we kind of round up, I would like to just quote some of the things that are being set in the chat. Corina, thank you very much for your comment, Corina, has written, both presentations highlight the importance of knowing local history in order to give the monument its proper value, and I could add there, understanding. And also in this context, I'm curious, in this historical context specific to the creation of each monument, is presented and made known to newcomers who see it. Tourists, artists, people from outside the community who are not necessarily interested in history, but may be interested in the symbolism and the context of the monuments and their creation. And Andrea, thank you very much, Andrea. She also comments in the chat, and she says, a very interesting discussion. Thank you very much, César. Your conclusions were particularly thought-provoking and invite deeper reflection on the value of individuals being well-informed beyond any potential ideological framing of the message story about the past. So thank you very much for those comments. And I will just give you both an opportunity before we kind of round up to give us something to think of in the coming webinars that you would like to dig deeper into had we had more time. And that is also coming back to something our host, Juana Nasui, wrote. She would like, from your experience, what are the most effective ways to manage controversies around public monuments? So on that question, are there anything you would like to send on to the next webinars that are coming up in this series? I will start with you, Cesar, and then Hannah can get the final word.
Thank you, Niels. I want to see the authority approaching to the people and to make the monuments for the community. Also, when they have a political declaration to make, but also the monuments for the people. And I told you my perspective about how to manage the controversy. It's how you start the conversation before it became a controversy. It's to show what will be done, how will be done, the costs and the place, and all these are the answer to the unspoken questions. So when you have all the data in the beginning, you may be comfortable with this. You may adopt the monument and to be important for you to show to others, to explain as a teacher to your inviters, to your guests and to your children.
Thank you very much. Hannah?
My hope is that we will dive deeper into cognitive dissonances and disagreements on public monuments. I wish us to be more comfortable with this nuance, with this doubt in how to handle controversies in public art. At the same time, I also hope for a deeper dive into like the common framework that we still need in order to discuss in a productive way controversies around public monuments, especially considering like source material and the proliferation of misinformation and similar, as Cesar mentioned. So my hope is that we can delve deeper into like a common framework that still allows for disagreements.
A common framework that still allows for disagreement. After the massacre on the island outside of Oslo in June, many years ago, on June 22nd, the then Norwegian Prime Minister said, well, what we are really about to defend is that we can agree to disagree. That is the core of our democracies. That is the core of the values that our unions are built upon. That is the core that has kept the European democratic values alive for such a long time, is actually disagreement and the ability to agree to disagree in a civilized way, you could say. So on that note, I think thank you very much, and thank you actually, Kostin, for highlighting exactly that it is very, very important to do that. Thank you very much to all of you for your comments, for your participation, your questions. Thank you not least to Hannah and to Cesar for some very, very thoughtful and inspiring presentations that just, at least in my head, keeps raising a lot of questions. And thank you for having me as your host, and I will allow Juana to be the one that finalizes this session. So for me, thank you very much. Juana.
Yes, thank you all. Very interesting. I've been nodding here all along. I would like to invite our colleagues here to also, after they are thinking on and processing, they can later on send on email their observations and why not resources, so that we can integrate in our future documents of the project.
you.